Hi everyone, my name is Jaden and welcome to my channel. I talk about animation industry career advice, so if you'd like to learn more about how to pursue a path in animation, please make sure to subscribe and stay tuned to my future videos. In this video, we're going to be looking over an example of a script and learning how to properly interpret and understand the different components of a script to then later translate it into a storyboard. I'll be demonstrating this with an excerpt from a script, and if you'd like to follow along and practice this activity yourself, you can either do it with the same script that I'm using or look for a script from your favorite film or an episode and kind of come up with your own interpretation of it. Looking at pre-existing work and finding unique and different ways to interpret a scene or kind of giving your own spin on it and trying to figure out how you would have visualized the scene is a great exercise to practice some storyboarding skills. So before we dive into it, let's go over some of the basic terminology that you should be familiar with when reading a script. So the three major elements that you'll see the most often are location descriptions, actions, and the dialogue. So the location will determine whether the scene is taking place either indoors or outdoors, or mention the time of day. Actions usually describe what your characters are doing or what is happening in the scene. Sometimes this action precedes or follows along with dialogue, and it's indented differently in the body of the script. When it comes to dialogue, or what the character is saying, this is usually indented in the center of the page with the characters' names or props and camera movements in all capital letters. Sometimes if you have like a specific emotion or inflection in mind of how the line should be delivered, there'll be a brief description of how the character says their dialogue in parentheses. Now, going back to what I mentioned earlier about describing the scenes, typically a slug line is the text that's in all caps at the start of a scene that briefly describes the location and the time of the day. You'll also have specific camera movements or terminology such as fading in or out. Continuous refers to action that moves from one location to the other without the passage of time. So in script form, you would see that as continuous under the character's dialogue if their spoken dialogue continues throughout the scene. This is not to be confused with voiceover. Usually voiceover happens as a narration with the character not physically present in the scene. So the difference between voiceover and off-screen is a character that's physically there, but we're just not looking at them while they're speaking. And then POV, or point of view, is when the camera movement is from the character's perspective, as if we're seeing the world through their eyes, essentially. So there are way more terminologies beyond these, but I'm just going over the bare minimum basics just so you have entry-level understanding on how to interpret the different elements of a script. Of course, when it comes to animation, there's typically two ways that projects go. They're either script-driven, where you start with the initial concept, maybe a loose outline, a couple of story beats, and then you go into the full draft of the script, versus board-driven, where maybe you just have a couple of loose ideas written down in bullet points and you kind of rely more on the visuals and storyboards to just come up with the scenes and the jokes and then kind of fill in the gaps with the writing afterwards. So with all of that being said, let's take a look at the sample script that I've pulled up so that we can start understanding and breaking it down. I'm going to go ahead and take this script and kind of have it side by side and start to sketch out my ideas. I'm going to thumbnail it a little bit and then refine the sketches to try to figure out how I visualize this scene through the eyes of a storyboard artist. So at the very top, we start out with our first slug line. It reads, exterior Old West day. So EXT lets us know that this is taking place outdoors. The Old West gives us a feel for the environment. I'm picturing like a canyon or a desert, maybe some tumbleweed, and then it takes place during the day, so probably very sunny. So the second line reads, a train races across the desert. Move in on an armored car. Suddenly, the roof blows open. That's one of our actions. So I'm imagining there's some train tracks and we're seeing this train full speed ahead going across the desert. And then the move in is in all caps. So this is like a camera movement. We move in on an armored car, which is also in all caps. The armored car is the prop that we're meant to focus on. And then once we get close up to that car, poof, suddenly the roof blows open. After that, we see exterior train day. So I don't think any time has passed here. My understanding is that we're still in the Old West, but now the location has moved over from the outside, maybe like a wide shot of the environment of where the train is, to the train itself. So now we're on the train, we're still outside, it's still daytime. And after the roof blowing open, money bags fly out. Then we see one-eyed Bart, parentheses, Mr. Potato Head, follows. So in the center, one-eyed Bart says, money, money, money. So that's his dialogue. We have the character's name in all caps in the center, and then the dialogue centered underneath it. And then following the dialogue, we have another action. So Bart stashes the loot. Suddenly, a lasso yanks his arm off. So we have another action there. He's putting the loot away. So this is where the storyboard artist can really get creative and interpret that however they imagine it. So what kind of body language would this character have? What kind of mannerisms? How would they stash the loot? Since you kind of have your imagination, there's so many different ways that you can have creative liberty to interpret this, which is really fun. So it's part of the storyboard artist's job. If something is kind of vague, that's where you have that liberty to really expand on it and push the acting of the characters and the dynamics of the scene. Suddenly, a lasso yanks his arm off. So that's the second action. He's stashing the loot, he's putting it away, and then all of a sudden, and then his arm gets lassoed and ripped off. So then we have one-eyed Bart once again in the middle, and he says, hey. Then the lasso lifts him off his feet. He falls dazed. So we got more actions here. He's basically trying to make a run for it with all this money that's flying out of the train, and somebody's stopping him in his tracks. So he's like, he falls down, he's kind of dizzied, and then a figure approaches. Enter a new character, and that's Woody, whose name is also in all caps. So he pins Bart with his boot. So in this scene, this is just me, but I'm interpreting this like I imagine one-eyed Bart on the floor, maybe like on his back or something, dazed, and then when Woody shows up, he like puts the boot on his chest. And maybe we have this dramatic angle where maybe we're seeing stuff from one-eyed Bart's point of view, and Woody is just like towering over him with his boot, just kind of having this opposing authoritative kind of figure, maybe playing around with the dynamics of the perspective and the composition of that scene, just for a little bit more drama. So then Woody goes, you've got a date with Justice, one-eyed Bart. So really, really cheeky, very cocky, kind of has him right where he wants him. He's delivering justice. And then one-eyed Bart says, too bad, Sheriff, I'm a married man. Which we've got a joke there that lands at the end. There's so many fun ways you can do this. Again, these are characters from Toy Story, which most of us are very familiar with. But even though this script, you know, the movie has already been out and it's been created before, just taking little excerpts of the script and seeing it in written form is really different to watching it, because if you just go in and read a bunch of text with no preconceived notions of how it's already been made or how it looks, you can really get imaginative and have some fun with this and kind of flex those creative muscles for drawing out your storyboards. So this was a really fun activity and the first time that I'm sharing my art on this channel. So you got to see a little peek at my creative process and how I go about my drawings when I'm trying to figure out characters and staging, and my understanding of how I've learned to interpret scripts. While I don't consider myself a board artist, I did dabble in storyboarding for a little while because there was a point in time where I thought I wanted to be a storyboard artist and I was trying to pursue that. But even though that's no longer the case, I still think it was really useful learning some of these skills, because storyboarding will always help strengthen your storytelling at the end of the day, especially in a visual point of view. One final takeaway that I really wanted to touch up on is the importance of a script and how integral writing is to the creative process of television and film, not just in animation, but in live action and in all mediums. If you weren't already aware, there has been a writer's strike going on, mostly because there's been a lot of concern around the topic of AI being implemented into writers' rooms and thus shrinking the amount of writers being involved in the writer's room at cutting costs. And it's a really difficult time to be a writer right now in the industry, because it seems like if studios really do go through with this practice, this could not only jeopardize the livelihood of writers, but also threaten the ability of a writer being able to continue doing this as a viable career path. Right now, writers are striking to negotiate fair pay and also monitoring the implementation of AI use in the writer's room. As somebody pursuing a career in animation, and for anybody watching who is in a similar boat, I think it's really important to stay current and up to date on what's going on in the industry. So as important as it is to learn and also be working on your portfolio and networking and talking to people, it's equally important to be aware of current events and the landscape of the industry as of right now. If you would like to learn more about the strike or how you can support, I'll also be providing links to that in the description. I'll also include additional links to resources for writing and storyboarding. If you like this video, please remember to give it a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more tutorials and tips like this, please give me some suggestions on what you would like to see from me in the future by leaving a comment down below. If you've made it this far into my video, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye!